we're studying the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abridged or abbreviated code of Jewish law. We're doing chapter 80, and we were in the middle of halacha of law, or paragraph 32, and we were speaking about spills. Right? If someone, if something you're wearing, a garment or a tablecloth or something gets soiled, and we were discussing how we can, or what we can do with it on Shabbos, because laundering, we said, is a tolda, it's a offshoot of the malacha of bleaching. Right. So what, of course, the 39 things we can't do on Shabbos are the 39 techniques that they use in Mishkan, and one was bleaching. So we're in the middle of 32, v'lachein, and therefore, im tinoik hishtin al eze beged, if a child urinates, but in the clothes, right? They didn't have disposable diapers in those days. Okay, so also you can't pour water on it, right? Because that's going to be laundering. Al hishtin al karka, but if the child urinated on the ground, or al kli eitz or oil, or on a wooden, something that was made of wood, or something that was made of leather, then mutar lishpoich shamayim, then we can pour water on it. We'll just point out, this is pouring water on the ground, of course, is dependent on what we discussed in the our first shiur. It can't be a place where things grow. Otherwise, he's watering the plants, the vegetation. But if it's other form of ground, then you can pour water to dilute it, to wash it. So we briefly mentioned this last week because someone asked a question, touched on a question that we asked. Adam noitel yadav, person washes his hands. Right? Something we're probably all doing a little more of in the last year or so. But a person washes their hands, and also on Shabbos, we wash hands for the hamotzi, various things. And he wants to dry his hands with a towel, a little washcloth. So what should he do? It's good that he should rub his hands together. So sometimes you see people sort of do something like this. The hands, it just sort of wipes off some of the excess water. It's good to do that. Then there'll only be a small amount of water left on his hands. So when he dries his hands in the towel, he's not going to make it waterlogged. Because we discussed the problem before about squeezing the towel. Now, most towels we have today are quite absorbent. It's really only a problem once, thank God, Kaina and Hara have 11 children, and some of them have spouses now. So if we would use the one hand towel, everyone washes for hamotzi, it'd be pretty wet at the end. Happens to be we always have a few, but because of that, but we have to minimize the water a little bit. For the little bit of water that'll still be there after he wipes his hands. Now, what? Not worried about it rinsing, about squeezing out. And since it's only a little bit, and it's dried your hands, so it's like dirty water. So it's not considered laundering, because it's used unclean water. But mapet savua, ain't lochish b'chol inyan. Now, if it's a dyed, it was colored hand towel, then we're not worried at all. Because laundering, we're not as concerned with colored garments and colored towels and various things. That's not how you normally wash them, and it's why wiping it with our hands. That's it. So practically speaking, just to summarize, when we wash our hands on Shabbos, we just wipe off any excess water, then dry them on a towel. A white towel, we should try not to get it too wet. If it's not white, then we don't even have to worry about wiping the water off our hands too much, because we're certainly not bleaching it. It's colored, and the colored towel, doesn't have the same concept of laundering. Okay, so that finishes 32. Any questions before we go on to the next one? Okay. Lamed Gimel, 33. A barrel that contains water or other liquids. So again, in those days, unfortunately, people didn't have water on tap. They couldn't open a faucet and let out water. So before Shabbos, you collected all your water or whatever else you needed in a barrel in the house. So you've got this barrel. Also, you can't spread a cloth to use as a covering unless it's the purpose of the cloth. Because we're worried you might come to squeeze it. So we discussed before that one of the malachas, one of the things they used to build the Mishkan, was they would take the husks of the wheat. And so, excuse me, the tolda, the offshoot of that, is that anything edible, if we take it out of something it's in, that's a problem on Shabbos. So if we have this cloth that we're going to use for other things, might want to use it as a towel afterwards, or I don't know, cover my challah, whatever it happens to be, then if it's wet, a person out of habit might squeeze it out, and they can wring it out, and the water comes out, which is problematic. However, if we have a cloth that's designated, its purpose is to cover the barrel, then a person's not going to do that. A beged, a cloth of some sort, or a towel, piece of clothing, any material object made out of fabric that's designated, now you've made its purpose is to cover the barrel, then there's no problem. Why? The kivan the michullah, since that's its job, that's what it's designated for. We're not worried you're going to squeeze it out to use it for something else. Okay. Now, just before we move on to the next one, I forgot to mention something that I wanted to mention after the last sif, after 32. So the concern that we had about cleaning stains and various things, the beginning of the sif that we spoke about last week was if you got something, a bit of cholent or something on your clothes. So we can't do laundering. So today, still we can't do laundry on Shabbos, of course, but today we have washing machines. Right, everyone You know, as difficult, as much as we may complain about doing the laundry nowadays, it's certainly a lot easier than going down to the river and having to wash it by hand. Right? Anyway, so we have our washing machines. So the question is, are you allowed to put things in the washing machine before Shabbos, obviously, and you turn it on before Shabbos, but the cycle keeps going into Shabbos? Anyone have any thoughts or suggestions whether they think we're allowed to do that?
I don't think so. Because each cycle, there's electrical current that changes. It stops and starts a different cycle.
Okay, so you're saying because it's got different different parts of the cycle, the rinse, the wash. Okay, that's a good thought. Anyone else?
Right.
Yeah, Ezra?
Could be.
To me, it's the same thing like the timer for Shabbat light. That once you set it and you let it go, what it does on its own. You have no whatever. What you may not be able to do is you may not be able to take the stuff out on Shabbat.
Hey, so you're saying in halachic terms that we have a groma, that something's indirect, and we set that up before Shabbos. So it shouldn't be a problem if the groma goes into effect. This cause, indirect cause, works on Shabbos. So that generally is, yeah. Melvin, you want to?
Yeah, is that muktzah? Aren't these machines muktzah?
They would be muktzah, so we can't touch them on Shabbos. So the only question is if we put it on before Shabbos. Can we put it on, let's say the cycle is 45 minutes. Can I put it on, let's say 20 minutes before Shabbos? So I'm not touching it on Shabbos because it's muktzah, but it's going to keep going another 25 minutes into Shabbos. Okay, so there's a few issues.
Still asking, are you leaving it there or you want to use it for Shabbos? In other words, what you're asking is before Shabbos starts, you have a load of wash, just throw it in the wash, or are you allowed to do that? Is that the question?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Generally, I understood you cannot do something of that nature, but I could be wrong.
Okay, so there's a few issues. Issue number one is the fact that it's operating on Shabbos. So we had amongst our audience here, we had two views. So although, as someone mentioned, that it's going to change cycles and do various things on Shabbos, that's not a huge concern for us because we've set it into play before Shabbos, right? So all of that happened before Shabbos. And we have a concept called a groma. A groma means I don't do something directly, it happens indirectly. Now, if you cause the groma on Shabbos, it's a problem. So an example would be a sensor light. Now, unfortunately, often the only time you find out that the neighbors have a sensor light is when you walk past on Shabbos and set it off already, right? And then it's a little bit too late. But presuming you knew one was there. So we can't walk past on Shabbos because we are causing the groma on Shabbos. Now, the sensor isn't turning the light on directly. It sends a message, so it's one step off, right? It sends a message, returns a light. So that's, a groma means like a cause. It's a one step off doing it directly. That's problematic on Shabbos. But if you did something, you set up the groma before Shabbos. So for an example, again, someone compared it to the light on a timer. So the timer is the groma. It's going to turn on the light or turn on or turn off the light on Shabbos. Since you set it up before Shabbos, you're now 2 steps removed. And the 2 steps removed, in this case, makes it permissible. So with the washing machine, although it's going to change different cycles, so it's not like it just operates until it, and you know, all the time. It's going to turn off. It's going to go to wash, to rinse. That's only that will not be a problem if we've set it all up before Shabbos. So it's not like you have to adjust the cycle. You put it on, you press the button, and it just goes. So that part is not an issue. We have another issue though, potential issue. Potential issue is noise, right? So if we do something that sets up noise, koilos, which literally means like voices, but sounds, on Shabbos is problematic. So most machines, when they finish, they let off a little beep or play a little tune, or the machine itself sometimes can be making noise. So the biggest question over here is Morris Ayin. So we mentioned this before in a previous week. Morris Ayin is when you do something, although it's permissible, it has the look of not being permissible. So I gave the example was, if I walked into a non-kosher restaurant, it's okay, I'm not planning on it, it's okay. Don't get worried, everybody, that I'm using that example. And I came out, I just went in to buy a Coke, and I came out carrying a Coke, and the cup has the emblem of the non-kosher restaurant, and people go by and they see someone who, I look a little bit Jewish, a little bit religious. So someone's going to see me and say, wow, you went to that restaurant. And one of two things could happen. Number one is a person might say, oh, I didn't know that restaurant was kosher. Because they someone want to ask something? So they go by and they come out, they see me with this, and they'll think, I didn't know that restaurant was kosher. And then obviously it's not, I just got a Coke. But they're going to go in there and, God forbid, buy who knows what. So that's potential problem number one with Morris Ayin. The other problem is a person will say, oh, look at that religious person, what a hypocrite. Going to non-kosher restaurants, forget it. If they don't care, I don't care either. And that can cause them to do the wrong thing. So one of the biggest problems we have with washing machines, well, electric appliances in general, whether it's on timers or cycles, is Morris Ayin. So nowadays, Morris Ayin can change. I'll give an example. When margarine, in America they say margarine, they pronounce the emphasis is a different syllable with American accent. But margarine, like butter, the power of one. So when it first came out, there was a concern of Morris Ayin. People are going to put it on their meat sandwich. People are going to think that you're having milk and meat. I think people are putting butter on their salami sandwich, God forbid. So when it first came out, the ruling was you had to keep the container on the table, so that everyone would realize that you're not having butter, you're having something else. Today, it's become so popular, far more than butter, that I hopefully would never happen, but God forbid if it did happen, I'd imagine that if someone, God forbid, made a mistake and was putting real butter on their meat sandwich, everyone would just automatically presume it's margarine. You wouldn't even think it was butter. It's become so common. So Morris Ayin can change a little bit with times, depending what it is. We have a lot of non-dairy, like soya milk, almond milk, all these things are very common today. So again, in the Talmud, and it's brought in the Shulchan Aruch in the Code of Jewish Law, that when a person if they make food, fried meat, let's say for example, in almond milk, you actually have to have some almond shells around the plate, so people understand that it's was really parv. So yes, Ezra.
You were talking about Magatayin and the fact that let's say a dryer or a washing machine makes a sound. What happens if you have a washing machine that doesn't make a sound? It stops after it finishes the cycle and makes no sound at all.
It probably wouldn't be a Marasayan issue. And the question is, nowadays, when everyone understands that these machines have the cycles, is it a Marasayan issue at all? And it's a little bit up in the air. I was just going to share one more case, the famous case of Marasayan that you know, there's we're not allowed to drink blood, of course. We can't consume blood of animals. Technically, fish blood you can. So you're technically allowed to have a nice glass of fish blood beverage. I'm sure everyone's getting very excited and can't wait to try it at home right now. But just to make it sound even more appetizing, in order that there shouldn't be Maras Ayin, in order that people shouldn't think you're having a glass of blood, you have to put scales in the cup. So everyone recognizes it from a fish. So now you get your nice, delicious cup of fish blood scales. Not recommending it. Not that I've tried it to say that it's not good. It just doesn't seem to appeal, the thought of it. So not recommending it. This is the concept. So yes.
I was going to ask about Amazon Alexa, which I don't have, but some people do. And I don't think that they realize that while they're talking, the Amazon Alexa device is picking up their voice 24/7, and it's waiting to hear Alexa do this or Alexa do that. It's waiting to hear its name called. So just by you talking, you're sort of setting it off. I'm assuming that that's not allowed.
Yeah. So I'll finish one thing in this, and we'll answer that, God willing. So the machines, generally speaking, the washing machines, we should avoid it. But if someone really needs something right after Shabbos, then you could do that. You could put it in the machine before Shabbos, and all they'll be ready after Shabbos. So if it's not an emergency, we're going to be worried that, you know, people are going to hear the sounds, or the sounds are also one of the problems of the sounds that it helps take away the spirit, the feel of Shabbos. So we try and avoid it. But if it's something that you're going to really need right after Shabbos, you know, a person's getting on a plane an hour later, and they've got to quickly make sure everything's done, then there's room to be lenient. So wasn't planning on mentioning it today, but as we had the question asked, and you know, we can't let good questions.
I have
several questions, Rabbi.
Yeah.
All right. Yes.
I want to know if you have a machine shop, if you have a machine shop and you set an automatic machine for 25 hours to run and make parts from a long piece of material, would that be okay?
That's going to be more problematic. The problem with that is you're actually producing something. And it's constantly producing. The washing machine, once it's set into motion, it's going through its cycle, but it's not actually, it's not fundamentally changing what it's doing. When you have, like, let's say, you know, automated machines, it's each piece, each thing that it's making, well, presuming that it's doing malachos, it's doing things that is one of the things we can't do on Shabbos, which I'm assuming it is, otherwise you would have it. But so that is that is problematic. Because each thing that it does, each act, let's say it's making metal cups. So each cup that comes out is a
Just
complete set of
cups,
malachos,
yeah.
or it's making hammers, and whatever happens to be, or the pieces for it. Each item is a complete set of issues. So that brings you one step closer. So we wouldn't be able to do that. Having said that, anything that's one step off directly doing malacha, anything that's one step off, whenever we have a situation, let's say for an example, in Israel they have some of the guards on the towns, they have like these little they're not motorbikes, like AV, you know, type there's four-wheel sort of bikes, and they patrol, and it's in certain areas it's pikuach nefesh, it's a life-threatening situation, so they're allowed to use them on Shabbos. So they have ones that are set up when you press the acceleration, it doesn't directly do it. There's a small pause. It instead, when you turn the handlebar to accelerate, it does something else, which then causes the acceleration. So it's a garama. Now you can't do that on Shabbos because it's a one-step doing the malacha. So rabbinically, we can't do that on Shabbos. But in a situation where you're going to need to do it anyway, it's better if you can arrange it that you do it one step off rather than directly. In other words, you're minimizing how much you're breaking Shabbos. So when you talk about these machines you can set automatically, potentially there's a time and place. So for an example, milking cows. So in Israel on Shabbos, of course, the milk on Shabbos, you can't use the milk that's milked on Shabbos. You're not technically allowed to milk the cow, but you're allowed to milk the cow because it's sar bal chaim, the pain to the animal. The animal will suffer if you don't relieve the buildup of the milk. So the way farms are set up is that they have the milking machines on a timer. So therefore they put the suction caps onto the cow's udder, and then they walk away, and then it starts automatically milking the cows. It normally goes down the drain because, as I said, you can't have benefit from the milk that was milked on Shabbos. That's another example of a grommer. It goes automatically. But that's then another reason, was to stop the animal suffering. It went to waste. Not like a machine that's making your whatever product you're making, that's for your benefit. So it's a little bit differently. Okay.
Rabbi?
Yes?
Okay.
Along the lines of what Mel Safra was saying about the washing machine being mukta, if the clothes are put in before Shabbat, but because the machine is mukta, so that would mean that when it goes off automatically, we cannot touch the machine to take them out during Shabbat. Is that correct?
The wet clothes out of the washing machine, no. Because they themselves really can't be used permissibly on Shabbos. But let's say a dryer. So let's say they went into the dryer before Shabbos, so it depends. Many dryers, when you open the door, makes a noise, or a light goes on, or you've got to undo some type of electric lock, or a lock that affects it electronically. So that could all be problematic. If it's just a door that opens without doing anything else, then you could take things out, because muktzah is really move the object, and you're not moving. It's a little bit big for most of us with the casual touch have it moving, and the door, if it doesn't do anything, much of a problem.
I have two other questions.
Yes.
One, when you mentioned taking something edible out of a shell, then, I never thought about it before, but now it occurs to me that if we're eating like a pumpkin seed or a pistachio nut, that we're removing the klipa to get the edible inside out. Is that also not permitted?
Nuts or peeling bananas or various things, that's not the problem.
I'm talking specifically like nuts and things of that nature.
So let's say taking a nut out of pistachio, for example, that's allowed on Shabbos. That it's different to taking the wheat out. The wheat, the husk and the shell have a different
consistency.
Well, they're looked at differently a lot. In other words, when you take some, let's say for example, peeling an egg, that's the normal way of eating it. So it's considered a form of eating. It's not considered a form of processing.
Oh.
While when you take you thresh, you take the winnowing, you're taking the grain out of the husk, that's considered a form of processing. It's not, you're not eating it at that point. It's a part of a process. So it's in a different category. They're very similar, but that's the fine line that differentiates them.
The other question I had relates to pomegranate juice and Moret iron. Do we actually have to go to the point of, say, putting some pomegranate seeds around it because it may look like, I forbid, blood?
No, I don't think so. I mean, first of all, it probably looks more like wine. I think it has more of that consistency. So if anything, someone would presume you're drinking wine. So
I see.
That's not going to be so much an issue. And the things like, let's say, the fish shells, that's what it's brought in the Talmud. We don't necessarily have to bring in our own ones. Okay. Yes, Melvin.
Yeah, Rabbi, I just I think it's I don't know how to put this, but I think it's a very touchy thing to start allowing people, unless they get a heter from somebody, to start putting things in a machine that'll be ready after Shabbos to go on a trip, etc. Because if people get into this habit, they could start doing it on Shabbos. I think it's a very slippery slope, this type of halacha, that you can start a machine before Shabbos or even dry stuff and then take it out after Shabbos. I think it's a very slippery thing, in my opinion. But I'm going to ask my grandson, who learns and tells, to ask his rabbi about it, because it's sort of a very touchy, very intricate shiloh.
I hear your concern, and I can see where you're worried that people might go with it. But we do this all the time. We're putting things in a crock pot before Shabbos. We lights and timers. So these are things that as we set into process before Shabbos.
But making cholent on Shabbos is because of the Karyades, whatever they called them, that they only took the Torah verbally,
yes,
verbally, so I think that's a different example. I'm just telling you my opinion. And
I hear you, and I see where you're coming from, and as I said, it's not a ideal. It's for something that's in a b'shas time of need. We said you could do it for Shabbos, but I think, although I hear your point, I think most people differentiate when you do something, you set into motion before Shabbos. They wouldn't confuse that with doing something on Shabbos. But, you know, I hear your concern. And maybe you do need to be careful who you say that to. So, yeah.
I think we're all aware of this being grandparents, but on a Shabbos, a lot of the toys are electrical, you know,
Yes.
they start talking and stuff like that. So what happens with young children and they're playing with their toys and they're trading electrical? I mean, I know they're not responsible for it, but do we not put those kind of toys out on Shabbos?
Yeah, we should avoid putting those toys out on Shabbos. You know, stick to the good old fashioned, you know, matchbox cars and, you know, and Duplo, those kinds of things.
Right.
Now, if a small child who doesn't understand what Shabbos is, took one and started playing with it, you don't need to take it away. Once they're old enough to understand what Shabbos is, you know, then you need to ask them to stop. You know, I had one Shabbos, you know, many years ago. One of my children in their 20s now, but they about 1.5, and one Shabbos afternoon, you know, we remember had the old VHS in the screen, you know, the one piece machine, and he put on a Uncle Moshe video cassette. So we had blaring at full volume out the window on Shabbos afternoon, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't turn it off. You just have to wait till it ended. But I always did wonder what the neighbors thought. You know, I did not, you know, but they had little children too, so I think they understood. So we had a question about the automatic systems in the house. Voice operated about, you know, you give a command. The example, the Alexa machine, but I'm sure there are others. You give a command and it'll do certain things. So using them on Shabbos. Now, to be honest, I didn't research that recently, and it wasn't planning to mention, but someone did ask. But the precedent that we start with in halacha is there was a question of training monkeys. So approximately 1400 years ago, someone came up with the idea that you could train a monkey and it'll go around and do things for you on Shabbos. So by giving commands. So you'll say certain things and you give certain commands and it'll be trained, and when you say certain words, I don't know, it'll light the fire. They didn't have the lights to turn on and off, but what you could do in those times. So the question, there was quite a bit of rabbinic response at the time. Can you do that? So, so let's go back a step. We spoke earlier today about a grommer. In other words, you don't do something directly, you do it indirectly. So that makes it one step off the malacha. An example of that is the sensor light on Shabbos. Going past the sensor doesn't directly turn on the light. It causes an effect which turns on the light. So it's one step off. Now, one step off you can't do on Shabbos, at least rabbinically. Where even out of the Torah prohibition, you can't do it. But there are many things that rabbinically, because it takes away from the spirit of Shabbos, we go a step further, and also to protect us from breaking Shabbos. If we're 2 steps off, there are times when it is allowed. So an example, we learned a few weeks ago, 2 steps off, we were discussing if you had the basin, water basin, a sink with a faucet outside, and it wasn't connected to the plumbing. And we said that if the water ran off, you have no intention of doing watering on Shabbos. So that's 1 step off, because your intention is not to do the malacha. And it first goes into the basin Only later, like when you pull out the plug, it goes out. And also when you turned on the water, it wasn't directly going anyway, it was indirect. So you 2 steps off, 1 indirect, and 2, you didn't have the intention. Then on Shabbos, it wasn't problematic. So these automatic systems, it really depends what happens. Now, I'm sure they're changing every day, and I'm sure every system works a little bit differently. Is it reacting to things you do at 1 step or 2 steps? So 1 step, now, besides this, it could fall into rabbinically not being able to do it the same way we can't ask a non-Jew to do many things for us on Shabbos, because it just destroys the whole concept and feel of Shabbos. It takes it away. Let's look at another application. We know, of course, that if someone is their life is in danger, so that overrules Shabbos. So here we don't have to do a grammar. We can just go direct and do whatever we need to do on Shabbos. But let's say someone's setting up a hospital. So you know certain things have to be done on Shabbos to preserve patients' lives. Let's say at a certain time, there has to be a certain injection or whatever it is. Now, obviously, you have to monitor it and different things. You could set it up so it's a grammar, it's 1 step off, just to avoid, to minimize the breaking of Shabbos. Not necessarily, you don't have to do that. What really comes into play in hospitals is a regular grammar. In other words, a regular 1 step. So rabbinically, you can't do it because you're indirectly doing the malacha, breaking the Shabbos. But here we have a person who's ill, not deathly ill. Deathly ill, we're allowed to do anything on Shabbos to save someone's life. Let's say just, bedridden ill. Their life isn't in danger, but they need care. So then anything that's 1 step off a malacha becomes permissible. So therefore, things like I mentioned, that machine, the moped, sort of AV machine, the little motorbike type thing that they have to guard the towns in Israel. So anything doing Shabbos is 1 step off the malacha. So it minimizes the Shabbos desecration. In the hospital, a lot of, perhaps you could set up machines like that. They have, for example, there's a electric wheelchair that's designed in Israel for people who have MS and other things that, again, as they control, it's 1 step off. So it has a Shabbos mode. So it's rabbinic. Now, again, if someone's healthy and under normal circumstances, you can't say, well, it's only rabbinic. It doesn't matter, on the rabbinic decree, I can do it. We can't do it. But if there's some other extenuating circumstance and the two go together, then we could do that. So the specific system that was asked about, how it's listening for various commands, I'm not sure how it works when you're not saying the specific commands, how it's recording, if it's a passive recording, let's say, many streets have, 24/7 video surveillance, and you're allowed to walk down the street. You're not causing anything to happen. The fact that you're being filmed, it's whatever's happening is happening anyway, irrespective of you. If that's how it works, then it wouldn't be problematic. If it actually does things on Shabbos, then it's a question: is it 1 step away from Allah or 2 steps? So like I said, unfortunately, I'm not sure how the actual system works, but and therefore maybe I confused you more than answered the question. But if it works that everything is 1 step off a malacha, then you wouldn't be able to have it on Shabbos. You wouldn't be able to leave it on. You'd have to turn it off, even if you're not actually doing something. If it's going to be 2 steps, then as long as you're not directly using it, you're not giving it its commands. It's just being aware or monitoring what you're doing, but 2 steps off, then you wouldn't have to turn it off on Shabbos. So I imagine it'd be a one step off. Designed for that, unless it has a Shabbos mode. And I'm sure that's only a matter of time. All of these things. Did that answer the question, or?
I think that it's on a constant waiting to hear its name called, because when you say Alexa, but even when if you don't say Alexa, it's listening while you're talking to hear its name.
Mm-hmm. So seemingly it's only a one step off.
Seems to be.
Or even directly, perhaps whatever it's doing, monitoring what you're saying could be direct. It could be,
Yeah.
The scooters, the Shabbat scooters that the Institute in Israel have, I guess, have okayed for use on Shabbat. Is that
for people who aren't well, not for regular people, but yeah.
Yes, for people, for example, for people who can't walk distances to go to shul. Is that a one step, or is that two step?
It could be they even operate at two steps. You know, I don't know mechanically how they work, but there's a whole organization in you know, they have a whole research institute looking at how to improve, you know, solve halachic.
Boy, my knee hurts. No wonder Sammy's in pain today.
But I know the ones that they have. You know, I know a family in Australia. Unfortunately, the mother has MS, and she was, you know, they had one of these. It's only issued for people who are in certain circumstances.
Right. I have a friend who has MS and has one of those.
Yeah. So it's not now because it's two steps off that everyone could use one. It's in conjunction with the person's circumstances. Okay. All right. Any questions before we move on? No? Okay. Lamed Daled, number 34. Okay. Im nishbachoi mayim ala shulchan kedoimim. You spilt water on the table or something similar to a table. In other words, the table itself is not wiping it up, is not absorbing it. You've got this water on the table. Now you can't wipe it up with a cloth that you care about, that has a value to it. Why? Because since it's going to get very wet, there'll be a lot of water in it. You're going to be concerned that you're going to wring it out because you'll want this cloth for something else. This is opposed to using disposable napkins, or for that matter, even regular napkins that just get thrown into the laundry. You know, you don't use them for other things. They're made for wiping hands and mouths and different things. Now, the Chain Lo Yinag Mappa crisis, before we do that, I'll just mention, even when we do wipe it up with a napkin, we start, you know, actively wiping, you know, rubbing our hand backwards and forwards with it. As it becomes waterlogged, we're also potentially squeezing the water out. The best thing is just sort of to place it down. You know, you put the napkin on top of the spilt water, a few layers, and then it just absorbs it up itself. Or just to gently, we have to be careful, you know, the same way we learned about the sponge. You know, if you apply pressure to the sponge, it's going to squeeze the water out. So they're with the napkins, but we could use the napkin if we're careful about that. And likewise, lo yenagay b'mapa koisis or shar kelim shipim sar. You have to be careful when you're drying dishes. If let's say a glass or another one that has a narrow opening, so it has an opening, A baby bottle, as an example, is something that you might wash out on Shabbos. So since its opening is very narrow, the mashkin, then through, you're pushing it through the pressure you're applying. This is going to cause, again, for the liquid to be squeezed out. Hey. Any questions on that? All right. So the next one, we're going to give a little introduction. We're going to discuss when it's raining. Now, one of the advantages of living where I do in Arizona, it doesn't rain very often. Very rarely do you have a problem of going to and from shul on Shabbos with the rain. But where some people live, it rains a lot. So your clothes get wet, issues. So again, in introduction, we'll just touch on some of the issues, and either we'll actually start 35 today or we'll start next week. We'll get the background in. So based on what we learned, can anyone see potential problems with rain wet clothes? He suggests
Squeezing.
Right, so we've got squeezing potentially is a problem. Anything else?
Drying somehow outside in the sun or something.
That's right. So drying looks like laundering. It's a part of doing laundry. So let's say hanging up coats or wet clothes. Coats might not be the best example because they're not. Normally, the raincoat is not absorbent, but other clothes could be problematic. So these are some of the things we're going to discuss. So if a person, unfortunately it rained, they're now soaking wet. What happens now? That's the question. Okay, so we'll start. Person was walking and the rain fell on him. And on his clothes. He's allowed to go home. However, when he takes off the clothes, he can't hang them out, spread them out to dry. Now, even if they're only, not soaked from rain, but certain hot places, the clothes can get a little bit wet from perspiration. Also, he's not able to spread them out to dry. How much more so, you can't hang them out in front of a fire or some other heat source to dry them. So that's once you've taken them off. But feel imarish for him, even if you're still wearing them. You can't stand wearing them in front of a fire if you're in a place where it's very hot, so you can really feel the warmth. In other words, you're standing there in order to dry off. Likewise, you can't shake the water off the garment. You can't shake the stuff. Now, a garment which you take very special care of that shouldn't get wet. It's something that can damage by the rain, whatever it is. So this garment, you really make sure never gets wet. And now it did get wet. Now you're not even allowed to touch it again. It becomes muksa once you've taken it off. Because we're worried worried that you're going to squeeze it out. So, what can you do is the question. So really, it's I feel bad. We're sort of the next SIF also is going to going to discuss traveling in water, walking in puddles, walking in lakes, and different things, and we're going to get to exactly what you do. But I don't want to leave you in too much suspense the whole week. So we'll just speak about raincoats a little bit. Raincoats generally are made of material that they don't absorb the water. Right, so there's not the concern of laundry so much, because the water doesn't actually get into the material to wash it. So you have like these plastic raincoats, the water's just sitting on top. So still we don't hang it outside, because it looks like we're hanging up it potentially looks like we're hanging up our laundry, but you could hang it inside somewhere. So, a lot of people, they hang their raincoats over the shower or something. So it's inside, it doesn't have that look of the laundry. It's not a material that's normally launder. It's not how you clean that material. So that's not so much of a problem. Okay. Any questions, or we move to the next one? Maybe we've got time to squeeze one more in.
Yes, Rabbi. When I was in New York, I was in a place where they had like a very hot water pipe. And if it was snowing and my coat got full of snow, I would put it like, if it was leather, I would hang it near that. Would that have not been acceptable?
That was to dry it or to make it warm before you put it on?
Well, it would have it would have both effects, but definitely to dry it would be first.
Yeah, so if you're warming up clothes to put them on, let's say in winter, you put them near something warm. That's not a problem. The drying, well, first of all, you did it already, so it doesn't matter. It's you can't undo the past. But again, it depends what type of coat it was. And snow doesn't necessarily absorb into the
it was leather with pile lining.
Yeah, so if you have a lot of the coats, again, it's like it's a synthetic outside anyway, so it's not really absorbing the water. And if it was snow that still was solid to a certain extent, it also didn't absorb in. If you had a woolen coat, let's say, and it's absolutely soaked, or not absolutely, but it's the something else, then it becomes problematic. Then we wouldn't be able to put it in front of the pipe in order to dry. Even a lot of the winter coats we have today, the outside is a non-water absorbent material.
What happens if you come to shul and there's water from the rain all over your hat? So can you shake your hat off or not?
So here we get into the issue that we just mentioned. If it's some hats are very fragile to water, and this could potentially come to, you're not going to squeeze it out. You're not going to squeeze out a hat, because the hats that are fragile to water, it's because it's going to ruin their shape, and any squeezing is going to be even worse. So if the hat is a material that when you take it off, when you're gripping it, there's potentially the water will be squeezed out, then it potentially then it could be problematic. Most hats probably aren't in that situation. Some caps, the thicker caps could be, but say the Shabbos black hats, that's not the case. So then you could take it and essentially you can shake it, as you said, put the water off. and you can put it down to dry also. The concern of moving the wet clothes is the squeezing out. So once it's a material, they're not really squeezing. You know, the movement of it isn't going to squeeze the liquid out. Doesn't become a problem. Yeah. All right. So we've hit the hour. Any last questions before we go? All right. Well, we wish everybody a wonderful week.